All right, so I'm going to be introducing our next speaker. Georgina Capetillo is the founder of Secular Common Ground, a dispute resolution think tank for secular issues. So, appropriately, she's going to be talking about conflict resolution in the secular movement. So, everybody enjoy Georgina Capetillo.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the slide pretty fast because there's a lot of information that I want to get in there and I already condensed it. So okay, so conflict is an expressed struggle between at least two inter- and interdependent parties who perceive incompatible goals, scarce resources, and interference from others in achieving their goal. In conflict, people represent their interests, but not their underlying needs. However, they can and do use power and coercion to meet those needs. So I don't have to go into it. You are in the internet. There's so much conflict in the atheist movement, from various points to people not liking prominent figures, to people not liking groups, organizations. So there are many different types of conflict. Our conflict is intragroup conflict. So intergroup conflict is a type of conflict that happens among individuals within a team. The incompatibilities and misunderstandings among these individuals lead to intergroup conflict, and it arises for interpersonal agreements. So interpersonal means two people. So two people have kind of an agreement and then people side. And that's how it rolls into a movement conflict instead of an interpersonal conflict. I'm going to say two names: Richard Dawkins, Rebecca Watson. So what seems to be the problem here? Our problem is really differences in ideology. People in the secular community constantly have arguments because they have different philosophical and moral values. These are frequent topics where people in the secular community kind of diverge and argue about social issues such as feminism, inequality, philosophy, politics, and current events. Disagreements on organizational structures, that means nonprofit groups such as SSA, SCA, AHA, and community groups and student groups. And that creates competitions because you guys are different groups. And there can be a perceived view of scarce resources, even though you'll learn later that is definitely not the case. So there's also different perceptions of prominent secular figures and perceptions of individuals or groups in the secular community. Uh-oh. Oh, there you go.
Touch it every once in a while because I don't think it really recognizes that that's a slide app, so it's like asleep.
Okay, so, and I'm sorry there's so much writing, but like I said, I condensed it. So dealing with organizational differences. Free thought organizations, community groups, and formal nonprofits have similar objectives, which, apart from bringing one another together, causes a perceived competition. There's also disagreements on financial issues, personnel, leadership, and organizational structures. Here are some tips to all those groups out there. So, summarizing is very helpful because some people, I took a poll and you'll see later, 17% of the 973 people that took my survey think that conflict in the secular movement actually arises from miscommunication, which is that's a pretty sizable group. So summarize, restate what you want, restate the key facts, the feelings and impact that each party has about the conflict. Sorry. Uh-oh. Okay. So desired outcome, and that's basically just stating your interests as a party and group members to describe what the group would be like if the conflict were resolved. Usually the objective is the same, but the way to get to the objective is different, and that's what causes conflict. If you ask everybody in the atheist movement whether or not they would like separation of church and state, they would say yes, but how to get there is very different. What impacts would the resolution have on the group's ability to do its work and maintain its relationship among its members? Also, don't talk about what separates you. Talk about what unites you. So share shared interest or seek shared interest. Ask the party or the groups if they see any shared interest among the conflicting positions. Okay, so that organizational structure is by far, and you can think about it in a global scale. I'm more interested in armed conflict and human rights, but that's more ideological, and that's more, it's very, very hard to deal with. So, many scientists believe that humans evolved to fear people and things that are like themselves because of a perceived risk. And that's kind of a fact. So it might not be possible or recommended to have other people change their point of view, especially because we've seen so many studies that if you tell someone they're wrong and you show them evidence, they'll actually be more stuck in their ways and like be more aggressive towards their own view and like believe it even more. So, but by merely acknowledging that the group is another, it's like the other, you're the insider and they're the outsider, just that fact alone, we can, just being educated by conflict resolution and knowing that that's a sociological problem that we have, treating others as outsiders, and once you treat someone as outsiders, you basically morally disengage. And by moral disengagement means the starting of dehumanization, which is obviously the worst thing you can do to another human being. So acknowledging the group is another to make people aware of their biases, which changes attitudes, and then turn a willingness to seek common ground. So, my survey, 973 people took my survey, and you can too, it's still open. If you like my page on Facebook, it's called Secular Common Ground. So 38 think that the cause of conflict is divisive figures who purposely cause conflict. 43 think that the cause of conflict is differences in ideologies. 17% think it's communication. 63 believe that it originates in the internet. 40% think that conflict can be reduced if there was less use of social media. So, these are my recommendations. What I did right now is a conflict analysis. That's I have a graduate degree in conflict resolution, and when there's a conflict, you analyze it and you give recommendation. Do not denounce people, okay? If there is an individual group that you do not like, for the sake of the movement, be willing to be in the same space or even the same work environment. Obviously, this does not count if you do not feel safe in that space because of that person. Then there's absolutely no way that you should be there. You should always feel safe in that space. But if you can get through that and you feel like the space is still safe, even if that individual or that idea is out there, then I really suggest that you do. So don't pick sides. If you don't have to pick a side, this is not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Don't pick a side. Keep in mind that guilt by association is wrong. You have to give, all individuals have autonomy and integrity, and they should be treated as so. Remember that the internet is also a point of moral disengagement. The internet gives us anonymity, and by that we're able to dehumanize people. So think about that when you're about to say something really mean on social media. You're not only weakening the movement, you're dehumanizing someone that is a real person with real feelings. Even though they could be horrible people, you still have to think that there's someone at the other side of that screen. So the internet gives us anonymity and the chance to dehumanize individuals. Discussions are encouraged, but they should always be appropriate. The sexual harassment and the harassment towards women, the hate towards women that is coming in the atheist movement is absolutely unacceptable. It needs to be stopped and it needs to be discouraged because it is not only a violation of our autonomy, human rights, it's also weakening our movement, which is very important. So the internet can be the birth and death of relationships. A way to discourage conflict is to make friends, and there's nothing better than making friends. If if possible, try to be civil with everyone. Everyone knows I'm a very aggressive and assertive individual, but you can be assertive and you can be nice. And I think it's very important. Remember, if you don't feel safe, someone made it not safe. Imagine if you're one of those people that made that space not safe. You're the enemy there. So please try not to become that person. Peace is important, and that creates a better space for everyone, even yourself. So, free thinkers must know that they're equally susceptible to social influences, whether good or bad. Free thinkers should also consider the following: maybe putting aside your differences is the right and responsible thing to do. So, to stop the escalation of conflict, promote conflict resolution, and like my page on Facebook. And another one is mediation, negotiation. I will quickly go to the definition. Mediation is a conversation between two or more people that disagree, led by a trained or, neutral mediator. Mediation is a less expensive, time-saving alternative to court. In mediation, disputing parties have the chance to settle their differences in a safe, confidential, and efficient manner, as well as objective, because there is a third neutral party. Mediation helps people get what they need, whether it's peace and quiet, family unity, or unity between friends, or just peace within a work or romantic relationship, a financial settlement, or just a chance to be heard. And that's by the New York Peace Institute, which is a great organization. Negotiation. It's to confer, discuss with another, with a point of view towards reaching an agreement where some interests may be shared and some may be opposed. It's an interactive process. You don't need a third neutral party. There are many ways that you'd be able to get what you want, and you do it every day. But if you're interested in that, I'll tell you about it later. There's many skills to get you what you want in an ethical manner. The pie. So, sorry about so much writing. Expanding the pie is finding ways to create value in negotiation. Before one divides the pie and figures out how much each person gets, we should try to make the pot as big as possible. So it's just like a creative way to find things that you need. For example, let's say two people are fighting over something, and this was a really good example. I can't remember what other. It was the people that picket at people's funerals and get the exactly. They're like, if you stop coming to our funerals, we'll give you some time on our radio show. That's a creative way. So like maybe if someone is just spewing hate, offer them something. Maybe they don't deserve it, but for the sake of this movement, for the sake of other people feeling safe, you might want to do that. And that is like a negotiation as well as mediation, because it creates peace, and it might be from a third party. You can, as a third party of conflict, maybe you're not creating conflict, remember you can help too by becoming a mediator and mediating towards peace. So once we learn both sides' interests, we expand the pie by brainstorming options that may meet their interests in hope of coming up with a solution that makes both sides better off than they would be if they don't reach an agreement. So just remember that conflict is not a zero-sum game. You can almost absolutely no conflict is there where someone can end up with nothing and someone ends up with everything. That's usually not the case in conflict. So repercussions. Conflict has very bad mental health concerns. I know that the women in the movement that are getting harassed deal with a variety of mental issues. So you can have problems sleeping, losses of appetite, overeating, become unapproachable. Sometimes members avoid meetings or leave the movement, as many people have. Also, a decrease in productivity. When an organization spends most of its time dealing with conflict, members may take time away from dealing with their goals and it also causes members to focus less on the project and more about gossiping about conflict, which is something we're all kind of guilty about doing. And this movement is saturated with gossiping. So I would also say cut that out. As a result, organizations can lose money, donors, and access to essential sources. So yeah, members can leave organization, and sometimes there's violence. In the global scale, this escalates horribly, as we can see in Syria, Israel, and Palestine. But in this case, I think that there's violence against women in the form of online harassment. Women and men and people that are advocates of social justice. And violence is, you know, probably the worst way a conflict can escalate. All right, so more repercussions. It interrupts much needed collaboration. It creates biases and miscommunication. It divides people. It inflicts pain on others. It can and often does waste time. It also weakens the movement, which is when there's a lot of conflict, nobody wants to go to Syria right now. Why? Because it's undesirable, so it drives people away. So why is this important? Peace is important. To me, peace is probably the most important thing in the world. There are great people in the movement. There really are. I love many people in the movement, and I look up to many of them, and I'm sure you do too. And we deserve to give each other a chance. And the secular movement is so important. It's not a social thing. It's a human rights movement. You know, forgiveness and conflict resolution can benefit you, and I hope that you can promote conflict resolution education, because I believe it's very important. And humanism, to me, it dictates that human rights are the most important issues in life. Secularism promotes human rights, and believe it or not, that saves lives. All armed conflicts and most human rights violations come from religion. So please try to look at it in the global scale. A lot of atheists don't do that. Secularism does save lives. It is a tool for human rights. So just know that when you're fighting, you're not saving lives. And that was the end of my slideshow. Do we still have time?
Yes.
All right, so questions. Oh, and this is my information.
So I agree that for certain conflicts, that ultimately arriving at a place where one feels like they can forgive another person I feel like that's beneficial, because that ultimately, on some level, it means that there's some sort of healing between the parties, and that they come to a place where it's like, yeah, I moved on from the pain and I'm ready to, forgive. I'm wondering what you think about sort of a race to forgiveness, like to get there, to do it quickly. And I think specifically about the shooting in Charleston, and how immediately they're like, let's forgive Dylan Roof, we forgive him, and I wonder what that can do for what role that might play in dehumanizing people, by saying, not giving people the chance to even be angry, be pissed off, not feel like they're ready to forgive somebody, and essentially wanting to move on before, and it almost is like these lives aren't significant enough. You just want to move on quickly, just forgive this person.
Right. I think the connotation in that story is that you're going to forgive him because he's a white privileged man, and that's the majority of the population, and majority of the population has problems with race, so of course they're going to forgive him. If it was a black guy, they wouldn't have ran to forgive him at all. They would have condemned him, like they condemn many black people, and that's why there's a saturation of them in jail. In general, I believe that forgiveness is good, but as very intelligent human beings, you have to understand the connotations of everything. You understood the connotations of that story, where forgiveness really is, in that part, kind of discriminatory because of their white privilege. I would say yeah, of course, try to forgive, but also be very aware. And as you can tell, I'm a human rights activist. I would inspire you to do so you can really get the full story. Of course, you want to be objective, and there is two stories, but if you're not socially aware, you would say, of course we'll forgive Dylan Roof. There's absolutely no reason why we wouldn't race to do that. But we race to do that for the wrong reasons. And you should always do the right thing. And that's kind of like more of a moral question. Does anyone else have a?
Would you say that, because throughout this presentation it was reminding me of something else that isn't necessarily related, but would you say that this framework of negotiation and conflict resolution is very similar, if not taken from the framework of truth and reconciliation tribunals, such as in South Africa following apartheid, or Native Indigenous groups here in North America? Would you say that that's very similar as a
Sure.
framework, or if not, almost the same thing?
So, a little bit of background in conflict resolution. It is a relatively new field, although, you know, problem solving and the idea of peace and human rights have been here since the dawn of time, since humans have existed. But formally, because of globalization, we have now tactics that are used globally. UN has, you know, a lot of conflict resolution initiatives, and we borrow from each other. And what we do, though, as skeptics, as a lot of people are very interested in the truth, we also want to use, yeah, there's tons of things that you can do that are that seem like they work, but we want to use evidence-based practice. So basically, conflict resolution is the formal study of methods in peace that work. And we've gotten a lot from the indigenous rights movement, so we borrowed. But now these are like kind of global initiatives to kind of make peace work in an evidence-based way. I think I have time for one more question. Are we good? All right.